Welcome to today's webinar. So for today's webinar, we're joined by Alison Smedley from the IWA as our guest speaker. You'll have no doubt seen the exciting launch of the Waterways for Today report, which was last year now, and we're delighted to be covering this and also Alison's own research in today's session. The session is part of the IWA and Canal River Trust training and workshop programme for 2022-23. It's the first one of 2023, and if like me, you might not believe that we're already halfway through January already. So my name is Jodie Weathers and I am the Restoration Coordinator for Canal River Trust. And we also have Jenny Hodson from the IWA joining us today. So I'll just do a quick handover to Jenny just to say hello and introduce herself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jenny. I'm the volunteer manager with the IWA. Work closely with Jodie on these webinars and on our upcoming conference, which we'll give you a reminder of later on before you all leave, and an update. And yeah, pleased to meet you all today. And on that note, I'll hand you over to Alison.
Great, thanks, Jenny. So today, as Jenny and Jodie have mentioned, I'm going to be covering two pieces of research that I worked on for IWA during last year. The Waterways for Today report, which you should all now be aware of, but I'll go into some more detail about it, the content of the report and how you can use it to influence politicians, authorities, funding bodies, and all the other people we need to influence. And then I'll tell you about the research that I carried out in my own time as part of my degree course. And I'll have two separate Q&A sessions after each block. So firstly, a little bit about myself, for those who don't know me, although I think probably many of you do, in some of my volunteering roles with the Calder and East Oxford Canals Trust, or my local IWA branch, or digging with WERG, or in fact in my paid role with IWA as Public Affairs Manager. I've worked for IWA for nearly 11 years now, but in fact that is about to come to an end. As most of you know, I will be leaving IWA at the end of January. About 6 years ago, in my spare time, I returned to education and started studying with Anglia Ruskin University for a part-time distance learning degree in charity management. I've just completed my final year. Results are due any day now. But this included carrying out a piece of work-based research. I'd just started researching and writing the Waterways for Today programme in my Waterways for Today report in my work role, but unfortunately the timing didn't quite work for that to be used as my project. So I embarked upon a separate piece of research that I hope will be beneficial to the restoration sector and that can be used alongside the Waterway for Today report. So looking at the Waterways for Today report first, it was launched at the end of September at IWA's AGM, and it's been widely publicised and distributed, with over 1,600 copies having been sent out so far. So why did IWA decide that this report should be written? And basically they dedicated 2 days a week of staff time, i.e. me, to it for several months. Well, we all know the benefits of the waterways. You wouldn't be on this webinar if you didn't, but it can be sometimes really difficult to explain that to the people that we need to influence. And there wasn't really a current report that helped us do that. So that was the background for why the report was needed. And so I was given the task of researching and writing it. So as an overview, it covers 12 key benefits which fall into 4 subject areas. It includes case studies, quotes from high-profile people, facts and statistics. It includes evidence from a wide range of sources which demonstrate the value of the waterways. The introductory part of the report has several sections, setting the scene, giving background information about IWA, navigable waterways and restoration projects. It includes some recommendations for government, who is the primary target audience, but it's written so that it's applicable to all politicians, including local and devolved governments, as well as funding bodies and anybody else we need to influence. And the intention is that the report will be a useful tool that we can all use locally and nationally to support any waterway project over the coming months and years. The research for the report started with me pulling together everything previously written about the waterways to come up with a distinct number of benefits, which numbered 12. And I then discovered that these fell naturally into 4 wider subject areas shown here. So it starts with the larger picture, the economy and the environment, then drills down to the impacts on local communities and the lives of individual people. This slide shows the 3 benefits in each of those 4 sections, but it's very small for you to see, so I will be going through each of the 4 sections in a bit more detail. So under the economic heading, we've got contributing to the country's economic recovery. So this is all about how waterway projects can regenerate rural and urban areas and improve the lives of millions of people. Then increased spend in local communities, where boat-based tourism and leisure activities contribute 2.5 billion to the economy each year. Then the third one in this section is savings to the NHS and social care budgets, which demonstrates that waterways are well placed to improve the health, well-being and longevity of the many people living near them through increased physical activities and things like social prescribing. Then in the next section, the natural and built environment, we've got protecting and improving the natural environment, where we demonstrate the waterways are blue-green corridors that allow opportunities for reconnecting disparate habitats, biodiversity net gain, and improvements for wildlife. Then a bit about heritage, because we all know that with their historic buildings and structures, waterways form this vast open-air heritage network. But it's the fact that it's accessible to everyone and brings history to life for current and future generations that's the message that we need to get across. And then sustainability. Our waterways face unprecedented challenges from climate change, but they can be part of the solution, as well as the requirement for protecting them from the effects of weather patterns, etc. Then the next section looks at local communities, so connecting communities through the towpaths, not just the waterways themselves, but it's the paths that run alongside them that have free access, and they connect communities and provide passage between urban and rural areas. Education and young people, where waterways offer opportunities for hands-on learning in STEM subjects, as well as the humanities and arts, outdoor classrooms, visits to waterways, and also intergenerational learning. And then jobs training and apprenticeships, which is subtly different to just education and young people, because it offers many opportunities for employment, covering training, apprenticeships in the tourism and leisure industry, hospitality, engineering, construction sectors. And then the final set of 4 is about improving people's lives. So this is improved physical health, all the wide variety of physical activities that we can take part in on our waterways, improved mental health and well-being, where waterways can help people through shared social experiences and connecting with nature, as well as just the improved mental health that you can get through increased physical activity. And then finally, creating better places to live. Waterways locations create a sense of place that enhance people's enjoyment of the area they live in, and this can encourage greater diversity and inclusivity across local communities. So the report itself, it's quite a lengthy tome. It's 48 pages long. The introductory pages include overviews about navigable waterways and a bit about the restoration scene. And then at the end, there's the conclusion and some recommendations. Then for each of the 12 benefits, there's some general background information, a case study, some facts and stats, and a quote from either an expert in the field or a high-profile person. It includes a map which shows the location of all the case studies. So they're well distributed across the country, and will include some projects that some of you on the call are probably involved with. So we've got biodiversity on the Wilts and Berks Canal, Chester as an inland heritage port, and the new community water feature in Selly Oak, which of course more familiar to most of us as a winding hole, but it's, as some of you will know, it's been built to bring wider benefit to the local community, as well as being important for the future use of the Lappel Canal when it's restored. So that's just an example of some of the case studies. The report's full of useful facts and statistics, which can be pulled out to use in specific circumstances. but collectively they demonstrate the amazing benefits that our waterways can bring. All the facts are referenced at the end of the report to acknowledge the source, obviously, but it also means that you can delve further into any particular issue and find out more. And there's just a few shown on the screen here. Some of my other favourites are 80% of people think local heritage makes their area a better place to live, while 45% of adults living in the UK have an interest in heritage transport. Canal side property attracts a price premium of between 5 and 10%, according to a 2019 study from the London School of Economics. And a study led by Glasgow Caledonian University found a decline in mortality rates among people living close to the restored Forth and Clyde Canal compared to people living further away, which is really valuable evidence. So I thought we'd just look in a little bit more detail about just two of the benefits. So benefit one is about the economic benefits to the country and how those benefits can contribute to the UK's economic recovery. So this is essentially about how the waterways can contribute to the government's Building Back Better strategy by being included in levelling up projects and the Shared Prosperity Fund applications. But it does avoid using this terminology in the report in order to extend the shelf life of the report beyond the current government. And the case study for this section of the report is about the Montgomery Canal, describing their success in obtaining 13.9 million from the Levelling Up Fund, which will see the restoration of 4 miles of the Montgomery Canal within Wales. And then in the local communities section of the report, Benefit 7 looks at how waterways can provide connections between different communities. Due to their industrial past, hundreds of towns and cities are connected to the waterways network, and their towpaths provide active travel corridors that connect communities and provide free, inclusive and level routes for walking, jogging, cycling and more. The regeneration of a waterway can also spur local communities to take ownership of it and work together to maintain and enhance their community asset. And among the interesting facts included in this benefit are canal side paths in Birmingham saw a 128% increase in use by cyclists between 2012 and 2016, following improvements to the city's towpaths, according to a report from Sustrans. And a scheme funded by Scottish Government and Sustrans saw 429,000 spent on upgrading the towpath of the Monkland Canal, a derelict and partially filled in waterway, no longer connected to Scotland's lowland canals except for water supply, but very well used by the local community for walking and cycling. And the picture here shows Stockingfield Bridge, another Scottish example, which connects 3 local communities for the first time since the canal was built in 1790. So that bridge has only been opened in the last few weeks. So we wanted some high-profile quotes for the report. So I contacted everyone I could think of who had any sort of involvement in the waterways and was fortunate enough to get a number of responses. So Griff Rees-Jones, who's a patron of the River Stour Trust, provided a very impactful quote for the natural environment sector. And then Timothy Spall and his wife, who wrote the book about their adventures in their barge, and our IWA members, they provided 2 quotes that were really relevant for different sections of the report. And then David and Sheila Souchet, who are, as you all know, very long-term and valuable supporters of the waterways, and our IWA vice presidents, also provided a brilliant quote. So you can read all those in the report. So, and the report also includes quotes from Tim Smith, the founder of the Eden Project, Liz McIver, the historian and TV presenter, and David Akinsanya, former BBC journalist and public speaker, who some of you will remember from the Restoration Conference a couple of years ago. So as I mentioned earlier, the primary audience is politicians in local, national and devolved governments. And a copy has been sent to every MP with a waterway in their constituency. So that's navigable waterways and restoration projects, which is about 420 of the 650 Westminster constituencies. And the covering letter that's gone to those MPs and other government contacts does include the current government terminology in terms of building back better and levelling up. So as well as demonstrating the benefits, the report also makes a number of high-level recommendations, as well as raising some specific campaigning issues throughout the report, such as the ongoing public funding of navigable waterways, which is essential, as I'm sure you'll all agree. But it is also important that smaller, independent and local authority-owned waterways have access to additional funds. And obviously, without funding, existing navigable waterways are in danger of being closed, with local people and communities missing out on all the benefits outlined in the report. It's also important that existing navigable waterways and derelict waterways that could be restored in the future are protected from inappropriate development that might prevent their full potential being realised in years to come. So the report can be used for emphasising any planning issues that you may be tackling. And obviously just maintaining and investing in the existing navigable waterways and the potential for restoring up to 500 more miles. So that's an overview of the report itself. So what have we been doing with it? So 1,600 copies of the report have been distributed so far. So that includes tailored letters to 33 ministers and secretaries of state across 8 government departments, 435 MPs, 100 peers, Scottish Parliament members, members of the Welsh Senedd, 275 local authorities, 22 elected and metropolitan mayors, and then hundreds of waterway groups and restoration societies. But then also a long list of funding bodies and national organisations. And there is actually a list available as a resource online where you can see who it's been sent to. So if you have any particular funding bodies who you think we might not have sent it to, let us know and we can make sure it gets sent. So a number of high-profile politicians have written in response to the report, including the leader of the opposition, and ministers from departments for transport and education, and several MPs, including the MP for South West Surrey, just before he was appointed as Chancellor of the Exchequer, which was quite amusing. It probably wouldn't have got to his desk once he'd been appointed as Chancellor of the Exchequer. So that was good. So we've been doing lots of publicity. My colleagues in the IWA's marketing team have done a great job in getting news about the report out there. So lots of coverage in the Waterways press, as you'd expect, but also it's featured, we've had a number of interviews on local and local radio stations, interviews in local and regional newspapers, and also one TV appearance, London Live TV, a local TV programme in London, where the local IWA branch chair was interviewed about it. So in terms of wider publicity, the first thing we've used, or so I suppose in terms of the use of the report, the first campaign that we've used the report in anger for is of course the Canal and River Trust grant review from DEFRA. And we're encouraging members and waterway supporters to write to their MPs about this, using the report as a resource. And there's a letter template available on the IWA website. The report is also now lodged in the House of Commons Library, having been included as a background paper for the 22nd of November parliamentary debate. Around Christmas, we promoted the report by doing a 12 benefits of the waterways by way of a 12 days of Christmas social media posts. Each one promoted a particular success in the last year, some of which are covered in the report and some aren't. So if you didn't follow the posts, you might want to have a look and see if any of your projects are mentioned. So the best outcome for IWA, having invested time and money into producing this report, is for it to be well used as a tool by everyone who cares about the inland waterways. On the IWA Restoration Hub website, there are a number of resources, including a version of this PowerPoint that you can adapt for yourselves if you need to make a presentation to people you need to influence. Then there's also lots of further resources, such as the report itself is available as a PDF. Each section can be downloaded individually if you want to raise a particular issue on a particular topic. And there's a PDF that just gives an overview of the 12 benefits and various other variations. So the printed copies, all restoration societies were sent a printed copy initially. And we're also making them available at cost price if anybody would like to buy bulk copies. So we've been sending out them in sort of batches of 10s, 20s, 50s. So they're available at cost, basically, plus postage, or you can arrange to collect. And they're also individual copies are available to buy from the IWA website if you just want to buy a single copy. But the whole PDF is downloadable from the website free of charge. So that's it really as an overview of the Waterways for Today report. So if anybody has any questions specifically on this, before I tell you about the restoration research that I carried out, I'd be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Alison. The first question we've got is from Roy Sutton. Sorry, I'll put my video on for you. Roy Sutton, he says, uplift used to be 18% in Newcastle or 15% in Milton Keynes. Why is it now 5%?
5%. Did I say 5%? So was that the London School of Economics quote specifically, or is he reading that from the report? I think it would be a case of looking at that particular report. Oh yes, between 5% and 10%. I think it's a case of looking at the report to understand the parameters of that. I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry, Roy. And foolishly, I'm now sitting here with my notes, but I don't actually have a copy of the actual report in front of me. I think there's even a bit more information in the report. So if we check the report later, and then you need to actually refer to that study from the London School of Economics.
Thank you for that. Anybody else got any questions that they would like to ask Alison before she goes on to the other section of her session today? No? Okay, then we'll let Alison continue with the next session. If you think of anything, just pop it in the question and answer, and we can refer back to it. But we'll now move on to the present of more up-to-date research for university. Thank you, Alison.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So, having attended the IWA's Restoration Hub high-level panel meetings as an observer over the last few years, I was aware that a subgroup of the panel were looking at a piece of work around building capacity in the sector, and that they would welcome some data around what issues individual societies felt they needed more support with. At the same time, something I dealt with in my campaigning role with IWA is the fact that we often quote around 500 miles as being currently under restoration, but this figure was often challenged and we didn't have any current evidence to back it up with. And then taking a step back from both of those issues was the climate in which we find ourselves. So after a period when it's been difficult to get third-party funding for restoration projects, especially after the flurry of Millennium projects, there was suddenly talk by government of funds for levelling up and building back better. And so the overriding issue for the high-level panel was, how can we make sure that restoration societies are in a position to take advantage of this funding now it's coming along? So this was my research question. The next few slides contain quite a lot of the technical research processes that I had to go through as part of, for this to be a formal piece of academic research. So I won't go into too much detail on some of it. But the overall research question is as shown on the screen now. And then I needed to identify some hypotheses. So these are the two hypotheses that I came up with, that around 500 miles of currently derelict inland waterway could be restored if the right funding and other resources were in place, and that the main barrier to progress being made on individual restoration projects has been the lack of funding opportunities. But now that new funding streams are available, restoration societies may find that they're not able to deliver projects due to lack of volunteers, skills and resources. And that led to the research objectives, which are shown here. So my first task, in order to answer these questions and meet these objectives, was to identify all the active waterway restoration projects. Now, I'm pretty sure that I did manage to identify every active project, but equally, I'd be very happy to be proved wrong. So if you think your project wasn't included, or your waterway or your project, restoration project wasn't included in this research, do please get in contact with me. A huge thanks to all the people who did complete the questionnaire. In the end, 55 organisations representing 58 restoration schemes were sent the survey questionnaire. And I was really overwhelmed by this completion rate, because basically 52 responded, which is 94%. And so in fact, that was just 3 organisations who didn't respond. For those 3 projects, because the questions around mileage, obviously it was really important to be able to identify the full mileage in order to come up with accurate questions. So for those 3 organisations that didn't respond, the mileage has been included. So I've just used the mileage that's available in the public domain, which enables some meaningful mileage figures to be identified. Of the 52 who responded, 3 organisations responded on behalf of multiple projects, while other organisations that are working on multiple projects provided a combined response. So the number of restoration projects also included branch canals as part of an overall restoration scheme, for example, but those were regarded as being part of the overall canal restoration. 4 of the organisations that responded have no current aims to restore any further mileage back to navigation. So these responses were excluded from the mileage data, but included in the analysis around barriers and problems. So this gave a total of 58 restoration schemes covered by the report. The bulk of the mileage and projects are in England, with just 6 restorations in Wales. The pre-research to identify restoration projects didn't identify any active project in Scotland. And we didn't cover Ireland because that's beyond IWA's charitable remit. So the headline mileage figures. So the previous estimate of 500 miles currently under restoration is not far out, basically, with the total mileage identified as planned for restoration in the longer term by active restoration groups, adding up to 516 miles. This increases to 566 miles when you add in the 50 miles of proposed new build waterway. And as you can see here, feasibility studies have been carried out for over 3/4 of the mileage. Although it must be noted that a number of those feasibility studies are a number of years out of date. 123 miles have both outline design and outline planning permission in place, while 47 miles have detailed design and full planning permission in place but no funding. And around 10% of the total, 40 miles, has all planning permissions and funding in place, with work progressing. So respondents were asked which specialist areas they felt their organisation did not have enough capacity, experience or resource in, out of a list of 18. There was also an option for other to allow for any topics that hadn't been listed. It was very encouraging that 3 organisations responded to advise that they had capacity in all of these areas. To quote, "The Trust has full competence in all the above, and the partnership has all the necessary skills to fully restore," which is excellent. But not so much for the rest of us, obviously. So the highest number of responses was for funding, with 77% of responding organisations identifying this one, which is not a surprising find, but it does highlight the importance of ensuring that the sector builds capacity so that new funding opportunities can be exploited when they do come along. The category with the next highest number of responses was volunteer recruitment, where 58% of organisations are experiencing a lack of volunteers. This represents a significant challenge to those groups, as even if grant funding was offered to them, they're unlikely to have the capacity to take advantage of it. The next and third highest number of responses was ecology, with 56% of organisations identifying this as an area in which they were lacking skills and knowledge. And then the next part of the research looked at barriers to progress. And this was a free text box, giving an opportunity for organisations to prioritise the top 3 problems they were currently facing. The results were consistent with the findings of the question about lack of resources. Funding continued to be the top concern of most organisations, with 32 respondents identifying it as one of their top 3 barriers. Volunteer recruitment was again next highest, with 21 responses. It was interesting that while most respondents mentioned the difficulties of recruiting sufficient active volunteers generally, only 3 mentioned specifically the requirement for younger volunteers. And only one mentioned the issue of any diversity of their volunteer base. The third highest grouping for this question was in fact a new issue, and this related to permissions. So this is things like the difficulties in obtaining permissions from the Environment Agency or Natural England or the relevant navigation authority in order to be able to make progress. So the conclusions: the research identified 53 derelict or new build waterways being actively restored by 50 organisations. And it came up with a set of accurate figures for the number of miles under restoration at different stages, with an overall total of 566 miles. And although funding remains the top problem overall, a lack of volunteers in many organisations will affect their capacity to deliver projects, even if sufficient funding was available. And more support is needed to build knowledge and skills around issues such as ecology and environmental permissions. So, as well as using the information provided in the research to update information on the IWA website, there are 3 recommendations that have been put to and agreed by IWA's Restoration Hub high-level panel. So, the first is around building capacity in the restoration sector, where the recommendation is that the high-level panel should use the results of the questions around barriers and lack of resources to help build capacity in the sector. And with the topics identified as being highest in need: funding, volunteer recruitment, ecology, permissions, and then the next ones down were marketing, PR and communications, and followed by community engagement, all being prioritised. Recommendation 2 is that IWA should use the findings of the report to raise with relevant government departments and agencies, such as the Environment Agency, Natural England and others, the problems being experienced in the bureaucracy and costs of obtaining permissions. In many cases, these are presenting real stumbling blocks to progressing restoration schemes, and an opportunity exists to campaign for simpler and cheaper procedures. And then thirdly, raising awareness at a political level. So IWA should use the findings of the report alongside the Waterways for Today report to raise the profile of waterway restoration and the wider waterway sector generally. Both reports should also be used to engage with local authorities and MPs to ensure support for waterway projects being included in initiatives such as the Levelling Up and Shared Prosperity Funds. So thank you for listening. Everyone who submitted a questionnaire on behalf of your organisation will have received a copy of the 16-page more detailed report, and it's also available to download from the IWA Restoration Hub website if anybody would like a copy. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm leaving IWA as a paid member of staff, so my last day working for IWA will be next week, but I will be continuing as a volunteer in a couple of areas. And the email address shown here will revert to being my IWA volunteering email address, and I'll be very happy to follow up any requests or queries which may involve passing on to somebody else, but equally, if it's directly related to the research, I'm very happy to get back to you if anybody wants to email me after the session. But otherwise, I think we've now got a nice length of time for some questions that I hope have come in.
Thank you for that, Alison. At the moment, we've not got any questions coming in, so would anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? We have also got Chris Madge on board with us, who would from the high-level panel, who's also hopefully happy to help answer any questions that anybody has around the work that they do and anything related to Alison's. So if anybody would like to ask any questions. Very quiet bunch today. Chris, would you like to just introduce yourself at all whilst we're waiting, see if anybody's got any questions?
So what you're asking me to do is fill, really, I think. Is that right, Jenny? What I can do is to give you some idea about one little element that we've picked up on. So the 3 objectives or suggestions that Alison has outlined. At the high-level panel, we've discussed how we can help to build capacity, and one of the ideas that we're developing is to extend perhaps some of the ideas around the restoration hub, and to provide more availability for expertise from various members of the panel. We've seen that you come to a problem that we've not dealt with before, and it's always useful to go and talk to someone else. But one of the challenges you get is to know if you need to get somebody on board, an expert on board, how do you make sure they're going to give you the right answers, that they understand the what you're doing, and can take you forward? And perhaps, you know, if you're talking to ecologists, how do you make sure you get a waterways friendly answer coming out in some of the advice you get? So we're looking at the moment, there's 3 of us from the Chesterfield, and Terry Cavender from the Buckingham Society are looking to try and canvass opinion as to whether it would be useful to set up a more centralised access point for that expertise. And the thought that we have is that perhaps this would be not a freebie, because nothing comes free in this world, but something that individual trusts would be prepared to pay for, but on the knowledge that they would have a vetted and friendly provider of expertise, as well as potentially the idea of being able to fund somebody in-house through group grants and that type of thing. And we've picked a sample to talk to of Trust in Depth. You may know it if you've been one of the ones that we've selected, to try and pull ideas together as to whether or not this will fly, whether it's feasible, and if so, how we would go about getting it organised so it could develop what you want and be sustainable. So those are the ideas, without going into too much detail. I don't know if that's long enough to get any questions, Jenny, but any thoughts you might have on that, I would be very interested to hear from you.
Thanks for the info, Chris. It's worked wonders. We have had two questions come in now. First one from Julie Arnold. Can you give us a taster of planned online and conference topics because of Alison's research, etc.?
I think I'm going to struggle on that one, so I think that one's over to you, Alison, is it?
Well, I think it's probably over to Jenny, since he's involved in the organisation of the Restoration Conference, but I believe that, and Jodie as well, I'm sure between them, they will be able to tell us which of the topics are particularly relevant to the research.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that one as well. And it was fascinating listening to talk, because I was jotting down notes for potential future webinars, Alison, which was fantastic. So usually at the end of the restoration conference itself, we'll be sent out an evaluation and a questionnaire, and we ask during that time what topics you'd like to see covered over the following 12 months of workshops. So Jenny and I always use that information to plan the next 12 months. So there's also our inboxes are always open at any time. So for example, we had some queries coming in over the summer asking for some crowdfunding kind of advice and information. So Jenny and I went and researched expertise in that area and then put on that crowdfunding session because it's been specifically requested by restoration volunteers. So if there's anything in particular that you would like to see, at any point, just drop us an email. But we do really use that feedback, and it's really important to fill in that evaluation post-conference and let us know what you'd like to see over the following 12 months, because we will use that to plan our schedule. And of course, with Alison's fantastic research as well, that provides a really good starting point for us to start to look at kind of the 2023-24 programme. So hopefully that answers your question, Julie.
Thank you. Julie, if there is some more clarification you require, or you want to put anything else on there, Julie, please feel free to do so. Sue O'Hare, have you done any work on the requirements for sustainability of the additional 500 plus miles once they have been restored?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think anybody has specifically looked at that. I know the Restoration High Level panel were looking at, in their last meeting, they were looking at exit strategies for restoration societies. The fact that a lot of restoration societies haven't necessarily thought beyond getting the waterway restored. We know that Canal and River Trust, for example, would only take on a connecting waterway if it was financially sustainable, which is a real challenge, I think, for a lot of restoration societies. So yeah, it's definitely something that would be an area that could be the focus of some further work.
I think sustainability is one of the topics that we have, isn't it, Jodie, at the actual conference?
It is, yes. So the theme or the topic of this year's conference is sustainability. So we focusing on kind of pre-restoration, so kind of what goes into kind of the thoughts and things that have to be done pre-restoration, during restoration, and also post-restoration as well. So our three keynote speakers will cover those areas. And then we do also have a breakout session on environmental sustainability as well. So there's that topic is covered during the conference. So hopefully that'll be relevant and you'll be able to attend and really enjoy that that day.
Hopefully that answers you. Sue, if you've got any more clarification you'd want, just type it in the chat. The minute we have no more questions in the chat. For those who aren't aware, the conference will be on March the 18th. Help me out here. Yeah, March the 18th.
18th of March. I'll when I wrap up at the end, I'll highlight a couple of key dates that you can pop in your diary. So I'll wrap up today's webinar, and thanks very much. And don't forget about the resources that Alison has spoken about as well. So, you know, on the website you've got the PDF. You've got a presentation that you can edit. There's template for letters and things like that. So please do visit and make use of all those resources. Well, thanks Jenny as well for facilitating the Q&A session. So thanks for sharing your kind of thoughts, experiences, and asking those questions as well. So we've got one more event before the Restoration Conference happens in spring. So in February, we're going to be running a week-long Safe Tea campaign. So it's safe and then TEA. So we'll be running that on our Facebook page, on the Canal River Trust Facebook group. So I will drop the link in the chat so that if you're not already a member of the group, you'll be able to follow along and see those posts. So I've just popped the link in there, so hopefully that you can see it. It's a fantastic resource to come and share any kind of questions or ask for kind of best practice or any challenges that you're facing, but also to keep up to date with these sessions as well. And as Jenny mentioned, we've also got the Restoration Conference coming up, which is on Saturday, the 18th of March. And Jenny and I will be sharing the booking link with you really soon. So please keep your eyes out on the social media channels, on your inboxes, because that will be launching shortly. So for those that don't know, I would just like to say goodbye for now, because this will be my last webinar, because I'll be off on maternity leave in a few weeks. So we do have on the call with us Emma, who will be the new kind of contact, and leading up to the conference, she'll be getting in contact with you. And the IWA also have a new member of the team as well. So I just wanted to bring both Verena and Emma on screen just to say a quick hello, so that you know their faces when they start to take over the communications.
Hi, looking forward to meeting some of you at the Restoration Conference, and I'm excited about taking over from Jodie while she's on maternity leave.
Thanks, Emma.
Hello, everyone, and happy to see you now and hopefully on the 18th of March for the Restoration Conference. I will be helping out for the organization of the next webinars and training, so hopefully I will see you there. Thank you.
Perfect. So yes, you'll be hearing and seeing a lot more from them over the coming weeks and months. So in the meantime, there's always resources on both the IWA and Canal River Trust websites and in our Facebook groups. And thanks everyone again for joining, and we do hope that you enjoy the rest of your week. Bye everyone.